All right, we're going to go here with completing the square, part one. Okay, here's going to be our first example. We're going to use this to solve quadratics. I know we've been doing solving quadratics for about the last week. This one is going to go with some things that are maybe a little more difficult to solve. It's good to use. It can save you some time in some cases. There's really specific things it's really good for, or situations. So here we go. This is not, so far we've done solve by square roots, we've done solve by factoring. We're going to use both of those things to use complete the square, and then later this week we'll get to quadratic formula, so which quadratic formula goes over everything. So anyhow, here we go. So completing the square, first thing we want to do is find what is b. So in this particular example, for this practice one, number one here, we're just going to find what will fill in the blank right there, okay, to make this a perfect square trinomial, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So b is 10. All right, next, we're going to take half of that. So b divided by 2, in this case 10 divided by 2 is 5. So b, take half, and now we're going to square it. So we're going to take whatever b over 2 is and square it. So in this case, 5 squared is going to be 25. All right, so there you go. That's why I put that over there, just to leave it up there. b is 10, take half, we get 5, and then we square it. We'll talk about what happens when it's negative here in a bit. So anyhow, we would fill this in with a plus 25 right here. Okay? All right, now, so that's completing the square to make it a perfect square trinomial. Now, we didn't solve anything yet. This is to help us get it set up. Now, I'm going to show you the next couple steps on this as to where we're going with this, because eventually we're going to get back to radicals. That's why we want a perfect square. So we've used this one. Okay, we've used this one now, we use that to plug in. Now, you'll see how we're going to use that in a minute, but the reason this is a perfect square trinomial is that what factors of 25 will combine to 10? Well, you got 1 and 25, 2, 3, and 4 don't work, you got 5 and 5. So which one of those combines to 10 would be 5 and 5, which we've done a little bit of this lately. All right, so we could rewrite this as x plus 5 times x plus 5, but really, we want x plus 5 squared. Okay, so for this first example, I'm just giving you one where all we're doing is setting it up. Okay, so notice that this number is actually the same as the second one. Okay, so that's going to save us a ton of time to write these out. This one gets us started. This one is what we fill in the blank with, and then this will end up being the factor that we're going to use. Okay, now that wasn't a full question. I know that seemed like a lot. That's why this first one I want to just show you the new stuff once. And then now we're going to go ahead for number 2 and do a full question all the way to the end. Okay, feel free to pause this at any spot if you feel like I'm going too fast. A lot of times I would slow down in class on some of these situations, but I'm trying to keep the videos as much to the point as possible since you can pause them. X squared plus 6x is equal to 27. All right, now we could try to move the 27 over and try to factor it. However, that's not going to work every time, because sometimes if it's unfactorable, we could still possibly get and solve a quadratic. It just means it's not going to be a perfect round whole number. Now today you'll see some of these we could factor. All right, but we're going to do complete the square. So notice I left a blank there. I'm also going to put a blank over here on this side. That is new on this one because now we have an equal sign. So we want all the other constants on this side. So we only have these over here. So b is 6. Take half. So half of 6 is 3. Okay, and then 3 squared, that's how I get the last one, I get 9. So there's my 3 amigos, 3 musketeers, 3 little bears, whatever you want to remember them as. Okay, so we've already used this one. Now we're going to use the 9 to fill in the blank. So now we've used this one. Okay, and so now we're looking over here, we combine like terms, that's 36. But on this side, factors of 9 that combine to 6, it should always be this term, whatever this one is. So it'll be x plus 3 squared. Okay, so we can kind of skip through the factoring that to save us some time because we have that information right here. Okay, all right, so that's what we did so far in the last one. Now what's new here, obviously this part was new, but we got to think about how do we undo something squared? Well, we take the square root. So if I take the square root of this side, just like solving square roots, we got to take the square root of the other side. So here we get x plus 3, because the square root and the squared cancel out. Now the square root of 36 is 6. However, we do have to account for the fact that we brought the radical into the question, So it could be positive 6 or it could be negative 6 right there. So we did that with solving square roots last week. Okay, so pause it right here if you need to catch up. Now to solve this, we still need to get x by itself, so we need to subtract 3. Now you got to be careful. A lot of times students will put x equals plus and minus 3 now because of 6 minus 3. Well, be careful there because it's going to be x equals a positive 6 minus 3 or a negative 6 minus 3. So these will be my two answers, and I'm going to write it up over here so I don't want to stand in the way. So positive 6 minus the 3 is 3, or negative 6 minus the 3 is negative 9. So there are my two solutions. Okay? Sometimes this part at the end gets a little bit long, but this is really what's new. Okay, pause it if you need. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, I try to keep this. This is one of the videos that goes a little bit longer. I'll try to keep it as much to the point as possible. X squared plus 2x equals 48. Okay, so here we go. B is 2. Take half of 2 is 1, and then 1 squared is 1 again. So when it's 1, you have the second and third right here are the same actually. So we've used 2. We're going to fill in the blanks with a plus 1. Okay, and then this one is going to be, so factors of 1 that combine to 2 would be 1 times 1. So we get x plus 1 squared is equal to 49. All right, so writing these out allows us to skip this factor part, or we're not skipping it, we're just kind of shortcut. All right, so there you get to there. That's all the completing the square part. Now we're going to solve by square roots, essentially, by taking the square root of both sides. We get x plus 1 equals plus and minus 7 this time. Okay, tomorrow, or in the next notes, we'll look at what happens when that's not a perfect square. But for today, you're going to see some perfect squares. So we subtract 1. So I get x equals, that's a positive 7 minus 1, or a negative 7 minus 1. So there's two answers here. So 7 minus 1 is 6, or negative 8. And those end up being my answers, 6 or negative 8. All right? So there's number 3. I've got a couple more here. So just so you have plenty of examples, I'll keep moving. I know that this one, really this concept and quadratic formulas starts to get into where things take a little bit more time. So make sure do your best to show to write out your work, write out your notes. You will get to use those notes on the assessment, since the assessment is while you're at home right now. For number 4, then we have equals 64. All right, so this one's a little bit different because we don't just have 2 terms here. I know 64 is a perfect square, but to do completing the square, we need just x squared minus 18x, fill in the blank, equals something. Okay? So in order to get this blank, we have to subtract a 1. All right? So we need just 2 terms here. So 64 minus 1 is 63. Now that's not a perfect square, but that's okay. We're not to that part yet. All right? So we take b is negative 18. Take half is negative 9. Notice I kept the negative 9. I kept negative 18 right there. Now negative 9 squared, though, any negative times a negative is going to be a positive. So that is a positive 81. So be careful. This is the first one we've had that's negative. All right, so we use this one. The 81 is what's going to go here. Goes in that spot. And then, factors of 81 that combine to 18, we're going to use, again, this is important to keep the sign so you don't mess it up. But we get x minus 9 squared equals 144. Okay, so then we're back to the same process. To undo something squared, we take the square root. We get x minus 9 equals plus and minus 12. All right, we're going to add 9 to both sides. So I'm going to write my answers up over here. So I've got x equals positive 12 plus 9 is 21, or negative 12 plus 9 is negative 3. There you go. There are my 2 solutions on this one. Okay, I got one more here for you. I'm going to keep moving. Like I said, I've said it several times, but pause or send me an email if you have questions. Pause it if you feel like I'm moving too fast. You can always catch up. That's one thing about this. Obviously I'd go a little bit slower in class, but I would also have a chance for questions. So I still want you to do that. And you can slow me down as far as using the pause button. So x squared minus 10x equals negative 24. So I put the fill in the blanks in. Those probably won't be there, so you'd have to write it out like that. B is negative 5, okay? We're going to take half, which would be negative 2.5. So this one we do have a decimal. So I would, if I were you, write it as a decimal. Don't write it out as, you know, the mixed number right now. Okay, it's going to be easier, and then you use your calculator, which if you're not, I would use the Desmos calculator online. Now, negative 2.5 squared, that's actually going to equal 6.25. Okay, so there's my three amigos. Now I'm going to show you, normally we would try to avoid fractions or decimals, but I messed that up. Let's try this over again. I said that one's way more difficult than it should be. All right, so my mistake was that negative 10 is b. We take half of that as negative 5, and then negative 5 squared. There we go. I'm not good at editing videos, but I would have edited that part out. So there you go. Anyway, so if you were thinking, hey, he's wrong on this, you were correct. We got it fixed though here before the end. So b, take half, and then squared is a positive 25. So we add 25. Now this is really close to 0, but not quite. So we've used this one, we've used that one, so this one goes here. X minus 5 squared is equal to 1. So there you go. Now if this turned out to be a negative and we tried to take the square root of a negative, we could actually get a no real solution on one of these, but not on at least this today. We get x minus 5 is equal to, now the square root of 1 is plus and minus 1, and then we're going to add 5 to both sides. We get x equals positive 1 plus 5 is 6, or negative 1 plus 5 is 4, and there we go. Okay, so there's completing the square, part 1. Obviously we're going to have a part 2 to that. We'll look at what happens when this is not a perfect square. We'll look at that in the next video. Send me a Canvas message if there's anything I can do to help you out. And if you have not yet taken any of the tests or the assessments yet, you need to get a hold of me. Let me know so I can get that set up when you get that worked out. Otherwise, a lot of you guys are doing a great job. I appreciate it. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.